Welcome to the channel, guys. We are back again, and I am going to be doing first impressions of two Masque Milano fragrances, Hemingway and Montecristo. So stay tuned for that. And if you like the content, hit that like and subscribe button. Really do appreciate it. So Masque Milano is one of those brands that I don't hear a ton about, but when I do hear things about them, it's usually good things. I've only tried one fragrance of theirs, Russian Tea, which I think is a really good, unique leather tea fragrance, and definitely one worth checking out. It's one that I don't think is for everyone, as it's it is definitely more unique, more niche, and that's one of the things I do like about it. I also really like the presentation. They have really beautiful bottles, so at some point in the future I would like to get something from the brand into my collection. So I decided to get two more samples of at least one that I know is talked about a lot, Hemingway. This is the one that I've heard the most about and good things. And then Montecristo, which piqued my interest as well. I forget what's in this one, but it did sound good. And both of these are suitable for the cold weather. So good time to be looking at these fragrances. But without further ado, let's get into it. I think I'm going to start with Hemingway, just because Montecristo I don't know as much about, haven't heard as much about it, so I think leave the mystery for last. Yeah. So this one is, I believe, inspired by or an sort of honor to Ernest Hemingway. So I do expect something that's very strong. Masculine, bold, that kind of thing. And right off the first rip, I'll say this is actually a pretty earthy fragrance. So if I recall correctly, this has 3 different kinds of vetiver in it. So I'm not overly surprised that this is definitely earthy. I'm going to put a little bit more on there just to make sure I got a good first impression of this one. So very earthy. It does have a kind of dirt soil kind of a vibe. And again, I think this has 3 different kinds of vetiver in it. So I think something in one of those vetivers is definitely bringing that fragrance out. There is a bit of a muskiness there. Nothing overly strong, but there is something giving it a little bit of a musky vibe. This one comes off very, well, not very, but a little bit dark. Definitely, it's a very thick smelling fragrance. And yeah, it does definitely have that very earthy, soily vibe. I don't know if there's citrus in this. I get a hint of something that is kind of a little bit bright in this, but not particularly. It's just very, very slight. And this is mostly dominated by that earthy, dark, soily kind of a vibe that this one has. And a little bit of a dark, sort of a musk with that one too. So I'm going to go over to Montecristo and let Hemingway sit for a little bit, see how that one dries down, and then try this one. So I definitely pick up some kind of a leathery type accord. And there is something animalic about this one for sure. If I recall, this one actually has hyrax in it. And I'm definitely getting something animalic now. It's not overly so. It is definitely very clearly animalic, but I wouldn't call it skanky. It's just adds a little bit of boldness to this fragrance and a little bit of depth and character. Definitely has a very, very, very musky accord. There is that sort of Hyrax bit that's quite animalic, but there is a lighter sort of musky vibe along with that. It almost reminds me a little bit of a lighter version of Dior Leather Oud. It's not quite as animalic, not quite as musky, and it definitely doesn't have any of that sort of fecal vibe, at least right now, that the 2010 version can have. There is something behind that animalicness that almost has a little bit of a bubblegum kind of flavor. It's actually kind of interesting, hard to pick up on what exactly that is, but it does have a little bit of this sort of very sweet, well, slightly sweet vibe in the background, in the very background. But this is actually mostly an animalic, musky fragrance. That little bit of sort of leathery vibe that I think I got earlier, totally gone. And it really feels like I'm smelling an animal's fur right up real close, and not completely clean animal's fur either, so it's not this really freshly washed animal fur. It's more like a bit of a wild animal kind of a smell to it, and it's actually quite interesting. It's tastefully done in my opinion, so I'm not really a big fan of animalic fragrances that come off to be fecal. It's a little too much. I do like a little bit of an animalic touch. I like things that are musky, and even can be maybe a little bit dirty, but I like it to be classy and luxurious, and this one definitely has that vibe. It has that sort of very rich, musky animal fur kind of a vibe that I associate, again, with something like Leather Oud, although not quite as intense in the muskiness. That's very interesting. That's very interesting. So I'm going to come back to that one in a second, but I'm going to go back to Hemingway and see what has developed, if anything has developed. So this one is definitely very earthy, very vetiver heavy. I get a little bit of smokiness there too. It's not overly smoky, but it does have that sort of dark vibe to it. And it definitely has some kind of I don't want to say it's citrus, but it definitely has something. And if I recall, this has a rhubarb note. Now, it doesn't come off to be particularly tart, so I know a lot of times rhubarb in Scandal, for example, Parfum Cologne, and probably Parfum as well, has a bit of a tartness that is actually a really nice characteristic. And that's one of the things that attracted me to this fragrance, is that it has rhubarb as a note, and I love rhubarb. I think it is an underused fragrance note for sure. Now, I like when it has a bit of a standout tart kind of quality. And I don't really pick up that with this. There is something in the background that I think is the rhubarb, but it doesn't come off particularly tart or particularly strong. It is still being dominated by the vetiver for sure. This is a very thorough vetiver fragrance. And there is something there that's warm as well in the background. There's a little bit of something giving it warmth, and I gotta say, it is a different or unique vetiver fragrance. I don't know if it's a combination of 3 different kinds of vetiver, but it does come off totally different than something like Encre Noir, or even though it's a little bit soily like that, or something like Salted Vetiver or Vetiver by Guerlain. And so, very interesting combination there. I'm gonna go back to Montecristo, see if that's developed at all, see if it's changed a little bit. Still quite animalic. Like I said, it does remind me a little bit of Leather Oud, although it doesn't smell like that. It has the same luxurious animalic quality without being quite as musky and robust. And I definitely pick up more of the Hyrax, and I think it has a little bit of a almost sour quality to it that I find sometimes animalic fragrances have. So it is actually quite interesting, and it is more of that what some people might think of as like an old school masculine kind of fragrance, which is what I tend to think of when I think of heavy animalics. You can go back in the old days and what Anateus used to be, or Kuros, or even the old leather oud. And it does fit in very nicely with those families, although it reminds me of leather oud in a sense, but it just because it's a luxurious animalic fragrance, they don't smell the same at all. But I do like that one. That's a very nice high quality, without being a high quality animalic, without being at all skanky or fecal, which is to me where I usually draw the line. I like an animalic that doesn't have to be a super fresh or super clean musk, but it shouldn't, at least for my taste, be fecal. I don't tend to like those. But that's very nice, very luxurious. So both of these, I definitely think they're both good quality fragrances. If I were to buy Masque Milano fragrance, would either of these be the fragrance? Maybe. I'm leaning towards Montecristo right now. But I might go with Russian tea, or in the future something else. I will say, honestly, Hemingway is nice, but I guess with what I was expecting, with the fact that it's the one that's generally talked about, or the one I've heard the most about, I was expecting a little bit more. And so in that sense, it is a little bit underwhelming. I am definitely picking up a little bit more of that rhubarb in the background with Hemingway, which does add a nice dimension, a nice character, but I would have to see how this develops. Of course, both of these are first impressions, so it's hard to really give a full evaluation, but I am leaning towards Montecristo being one that I like more. But as I was saying, both of these cold weather fragrances, I think you could wear them in similar occasions, because one is a heavy vetiver and one's a heavy animalic, and both are often thought of as sort of classy gentlemen's fragrances or scent profiles. So I think both of them could be dressed up easily, could be worn to formal occasions. I don't think either one of these, I don't think are particularly risky. I don't know that I wouldn't consider them to be mass appealing fragrances by any means, but they aren't things that are really going to put most people off. They might just be indifferent to it for the most part. But all in all, I do think they're solid. But I would need to wear them more to really decide. Neither one of these are love at first sniff, if that's the way you want to think about it. But I do think they both have high quality composition, and they both might unfold to be really, really good. But right now I'll say that they're both good, in my personal opinion. Anyways, I think I'm going to cut the video there, guys. Have you tried anything from Masque Milano? Leave a comment down below and let me know what it is you've tried, what you like, what you think I should try. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.